Hello everyone, Bill here again. This is going to be my next part 2 of Christianity 101. And what I'm going to discuss is something that most Christians don't realize, although if they sat down and thought about it for long enough, they'd probably realize this. But if we were to somehow go back in time and bring back Peter, James, Paul, Timothy, and we were to bring them to the 21st century and actually show them what church looks like here in the West, they would actually be quite surprised in how much it has changed since the first century. In the time of the first century, right after Christ's ascension into heaven, what it was is that, first of all, Christianity was very much illegal at the time. And the thing is that, again, if we were to somehow bring these people to the 21st century, even if we were to bring them to the most conservative, to the most liberal, to the most traditional church service, to the most modern church services, again, they would not recognize church service like we have it today. One of the things is that the Jehovah's Witnesses kind of go off on this, where they go, well, they went from house to house and preach the gospel. Well, that's not totally true. A lot of times, church service and church was held in private homes. One of the big things is that this is kind of alien to us here in the West, just that the congregations were so small to where basically in your home, the size of a living room, you could have church, and basically it was your family, maybe a few close friends. You might have 12, 15 people, maybe. Okay, but then that was it, and that was your church congregation. Remember, the church was underground at the time. If in some places, if it was allowed, if they could actually do it, church service was actually held outside. This was for multiple reasons. If the weather was pleasant outside, there was no reason to have it inside. And then again, you could have it outside. That was providing you could get far enough away, if it was illegal, okay, to have church outside. Okay. One of the things, I recently heard a story on a Christian radio station where I live, where there was a church, I believe it was either out in Texas or South Carolina, North Carolina, somewhere out that way, where they were actually, what they were deliberately doing was they were holding church services on Sunday in the park, in the community town park. The reason being is that what they really wanted to do was to preach the gospel to the homeless and for those people who probably don't normally go to church, but yet they would take their kids to the park on Sunday morning so they could play around outside with all the equipment. And what they really didn't realize was that all of a sudden these church services actually truly became services where they had a community of close to 75 people in a single service. And the reason being is everyone would just bring their own lawn chairs, sit down, the minister would come, preach the gospel, and then that was it. There was no setup, there was no microphone, there was no nothing. There was no hymnals, no bulletins, nothing. It was just simply, we're having church outside. And of course, what they would do is they would hand out flyers to promote the church to actually go to the church building. And this actually became quite effective outreach for the church. Now, another thing that, again, if we were to bring Peter, James, John, and Paul to the 21st century, music. Yes, it was quite common for them to sing hymnals. As a matter of fact, in the book of Acts, it declares that they sang hymns and spiritual songs while they were chained up in prison. Okay, well, they did that a cappella. They didn't have music, they didn't have instruments, although they were around. Okay, it was not really a part of church service. That's something that would come much later. Now, there's no rule against that, because if you read Psalms 150, okay, they would have, it was not unusual to have instruments, musical instruments, in the Jewish synagogue songs, although, again, it was not a common thing, but it was not objected either. One of the things is that, again, here in the West, here in the United States, church service lasts about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. The thing is that in the early church service, if they could do it, okay, would actually last much, much longer than this. Okay, it all depends on where the Spirit moved them. And the thing is that, again, we think of it as very organized, sing a couple of songs, announcements, sing another couple of songs, there's the sermon, maybe another song afterwards. Okay, this would be quite common in today's world, but back in the first century, and probably for the first 200 or 300 years, that really wasn't how it was for the church back then. Okay, here's another thing that is really just quite removed, especially when you get to a more compact area of population around the world. A lot of people travel now to church. There's a mega church where I live, and I know one people, they actually travel 90 miles one way just so they can go to church service on Sunday morning. Okay, this would have been unheard of even 50 years ago. Okay, one of the big things is that, okay, there was a true sense of community. The entire community, the entire town would come together. And in fact, even up to, like I said, 50 years ago, you didn't travel to your next town even to go to church. You simply went to church in the same town you lived in. Okay? So that's something we really lost in modern day Christianity is that we can now have the ability to travel quite a distance to go to church. Okay? That wasn't so back then. And again, even up to 50 years ago, this wasn't so. That was quite out of the ordinary to travel a distance to go to church. So there's my first things, is that Christianity 101. A lot of Christians don't realize that the church today is not the way the church was in the first century. And a lot of people are very surprised at this. So with the next time you go to church, okay, kind of look around and realize that what you have there is actually truly something unique of the West and of the modern day. It wasn't like that back in the first century. So there you go, and see you all next time.